this just came to me now as we're filming this. And look at this. This is absolutely strikingly beautiful. These are Colombian Muso emeralds. A friend of mine who's been in the business for years and years and years just brought this to my office, and he's asking me would I consider buying this or going in partnership with him because it just got cut. So a piece like this has approximately 46 pieces, weighs 137 carats. They're from Muso mine, and they're as fine as you can buy an emerald. And the color is fantastic, and they're very clean. Now this is something rare, and what I would do with this is either make a neck piece and a bracelet, or an assortment of things, including earrings and a whole set to go together. What to me is interesting about a set like this is that it doesn't come across all the time. In what I do, you can't just go out to the store and say, I want to now buy a necklace, bracelet, earring set of Colombian Muso emerald. So this is part of what excites me in my business. Every day I get offered different things. Not always like this, but every day we see different stones, things that we can buy, and this is really beautiful. All of these are very unusual shapes, and they're free-form shapes, as we call it, and they're done in basically cabochon form, which means it's just polished and not faceted. So we're going to make something beautiful out of this. I can sense it. This year I probably sold the prettiest sapphire I have ever shown. It's 21 karat natural Burmese gem sapphire. Blue, that's a rich blue without being over dark, without being gray. Just a really, really rich blue. And I sold it to a great client who I met recently, loved what we do. She's bought numerous pieces, and this was one of her favorites from the beginning, from when she first met me. But obviously it's a little more expensive piece. It's a rare piece. You don't find too many 21.5 karat Burmese unheated natural stones running around that are cut in what's called a sugarloaf shape, and I'll show you a picture in a moment. It's just beautiful. But what made this sale kind of interesting was that I know this lady wanted this piece, and I know obviously she can afford it, but she had bought several other pieces, many different things, and I wasn't even per se trying to sell her this piece. It was just a beautiful piece that was part of my collection, and I was proud to have it. And I started to describe to her that the piece was being shown overseas in Asia, and somebody had made an offer. And she asked me point blank, well, what was the offer? And I said, you know, I'd rather not discuss it. And she says, well, if it's this number, I might consider it. And, you know, I'm thinking, it's not quite that number, but if you would consider it, and I start to talk to her about it finally, like, if you would really consider it, what would you be willing to pay? And she looks at me and she says, you know, I've bought enough as it is, but if I were going to buy it, you'd have to give me time to pay for it. What do you mean, time to pay for it? She looks at me and she says, and she starts to laugh, and she says, I would not buy this thing unless you gave me a year to pay for it. And I said, well, I wouldn't sell it unless you gave it price that was close to what I want to sell it for. So in between laughing and discussing what it was, eventually we came to a closer and closer understanding. And when the people in Asia made an offer that was a little too low, and I came up to her and I said, listen, if you can beat this offer, I would consider your terms. And that's how we came to a conclusion. But all I can say is this: of all the years I've bought and sold sapphires, this is the prettiest piece I think I've ever had in that color blue. It's a color that when you see it, you can't miss it, because it's as rich can be without being dark, without being gray, and the shape and the cut, everything is beautiful about this piece. And I'm just, in a lot of ways, I'm thrilled it went to somebody that today I know quite well, that is a great person, and then enjoys fine jewelry, who normally would not have bought a piece this expensive. Though she has the money, to a lot of clients, it's not always about the money. It's about, do they feel comfortable buying a certain piece at a certain time? I have clients that range from very, very knowledgeable collectors to extremely tough corporate buyers that buy for high-end stores, to ladies that have never been to a showing, that know nothing, that the first time buying, and they come to one of the showings in a store or at a gem show. So I have the whole range. I can't say enough about not judging people, and I've already maybe mentioned it once before, but I'll say this. I was at a trade show once, quite a few years ago, 15 years plus, and a character comes up to my booth. And now I was in our industry, relatively very small character, but I had some nice things, and I had some good connections. Guy comes up and he says, "How much is this stone?" In a very gruff voice with a cigar hanging out his mouth. And I look at the fellow, and he's dressed in jeans, cowboy boots, and he's got a marine t-shirt on, and not the typical character you'd expect at a high-end jewelry show. And next to him is another fellow in a briefcase and a three-piece suit. So I didn't know who was who. All I know is that one of them was the jeweler, the other one might have been a client, might have been the financier. I had no idea. All I know is I answered him as best I could, told him all about the stone. It was a beautiful tanzanite, weighing maybe 30 carats, a big stone. All I know is he negotiated back and forth with me. We came to an agreement. Came time to pay the bill. He reaches in his pocket, he pulls out a big wad of $100 bills. He starts counting it out, boom, puts the money on the counter. And a cigar hanging out his mouth. He said, "If you ever get a nice emerald, I'd be a buyer." And I thought, maybe this fellow got lucky where our show happened to be in Vegas, and I'm thinking, this guy just got lucky at the tables last night. He has a few dollars. He wants to buy something nice. But I figured, what the hell, I'll follow up, and if I get a nice emerald, I'll follow up with it. 3 weeks go by. I call once, twice, no answer, third time, no answer. And I thought, maybe the number isn't real. So I figured I'll try once more. Sure enough, I get the guy. And finally I show him, or I describe to him that I have an emerald that would be worthwhile showing him. And I say, by the way, this happens to be a little bit over $200,000. Is this something that you might consider? And I hear this voice on the other side, kind of, "Are you kidding me?" It was almost like he was asking me if I was doubting his capacity to pay for this stone. I just didn't know if it was something that would be in the realm of the range of money that he would consider spending. If it's good enough, I'll buy it. That's my problem. He just had this very serious voice. So I go to show him this stone. First stone I show him after this initial deal we had done. It's almost $200,000 emerald. We come to an agreement. And this took a little while, but we come to an agreement. He comes in to buy it. And he says, "Hubert, here's a breakfast cognac and here's a breakfast cigar so we can celebrate our initial deal." As it turns out, this man was a very successful man, had sold an airline company, and money was the last thing that he lacked. He had incredible talent for anything that is collectible, whether it be art, jewelry, guns, knives, cigars, booze. Just an incredible man. And had I short-changed him, had I not realized or had I not paid attention to this man, I would have missed a great client and potentially a great friend who for 15, 20 years taught me so much about art, about anything collectible, about everything, not to mention that he bought millions and millions of dollars worth of gems from me in the years to come. And it just solidified in my mind that you can never judge people. Here's a guy that I know a lot of people may not have even dealt with just based on how he looked, and that's how he chose to dress. But he was the sharpest, clearest, wealthiest guy you could meet. People have all different kinds of ways of presenting jewelry, and it's always different, it's always interesting. One thing that comes to my mind that I recall from being on the cruise, from being on Crystal, was the time I sold to a gentleman who I never expected would buy something so fine. I sold him a beautiful canary diamond ring, and this was for their anniversary, and I don't remember the year, but it was, let's say, 30 plus years, and a beautiful couple. And he said, "Hubert, I want to get her something special." And I thought, based on what I'd talked to him prior, that he might spend, let's say, 10, 15,000, which is a considerable amount of money. But all I know is the ring he ended up buying was, let's say, 3 to 4 times this amount. And I think he only decided to go with this ring. It wasn't anything I said. It was just that he could see his wife's eyes, and they lit up. You know, she put this on, and it was like, wow. And this to him made a difference, made it special. So we negotiated the ring without her knowing. And sure enough, a couple days, there was a special party coming up, and he had recruited the help, not only the head sommelier, but he had also gotten the hotel director of the ship to be present, who was a friend of theirs. They had cruised often enough that they knew a lot of the people on the ship. So the head sommelier and the hotel director were in on it, and one of the bartenders where a bar that they were always at were in on it. And so I was positioned to stand next to this bar, and then the sommelier came over, and it just so happened that his wife was there because obviously she was positioned to stand right next. "Oh, Hubert, how are you?" And we start talking. And amongst all of this commotion, next thing I know, the band stops what they were playing, some waltz. And the announcer, the cruise director, gets on stage and says, "Oh, and we'd like to interrupt this dance for just a special moment. And we have a very dear anniversary for Mr. Smith and Mrs. Smith." And next thing I know, here comes the the hotel director, followed by the head sommelier, and they're carrying a silver platter. And the lady is standing right next to me, and next comes her husband, stands right next to her, and makes this beautiful, short, beautiful speech saying, "Honey, this is the best thing that could have ever happened to us, and this is the best thing I could think of getting you." And it comes on a silver platter, followed by the hotel director, followed by the head sommelier, and he lifts this platter, and there's a beautiful yellow canary ring. And she started to cry, and I was right next to her, and it just felt like, you know, this makes my job feel really special. And also, one of the things that's interesting about a piece like this is people don't realize once it's finished, but people like me or somebody else in my office will sit here and we'll spend sometimes a long amount of time trying to decide whether this skinny piece fits in with this whole thing or it doesn't. We were trying to decide the backing, the clasp, whether we should make a flat, larger piece or a little daintier, smaller piece. For a while I thought that this stone did not, or excuse me, this one here did not fit at all. So you look for another stone, you cut another stone, and then after you spend 2 days cutting a new stone, you decide, you know what, I like the first one better. So it sounds strange, but we spend sometimes a lot of time on things that seem completely irrelevant. But once it works, it works. And sometimes you make pieces that you think, you hoped, you put your best effort, and they're not quite there. And once you realize and finish the piece, you're kind of like, oh, well, we tried. So you start over. But that's the neat thing about doing what we do. How do I know when something is right? How do I know when something is going to be a great piece? I think the first thing I look at is the aesthetics of it, the color. whether it's a diamond or a colored gem. Color, I think, is the first thing that comes to my eye. And then I look at shape. Can I make something out of this shape and this color that's going to translate into a beautiful necklace, a beautiful pendant, a beautiful ring? It's the best thing about what I do, is that there's no constraints. You can work with white, you can work with black, you can work with green, yellow, blue. It's so wide open. You can really do anything. First, they have to fit your eye. You have to like it. If you see something you like, whether it's me or you who's going to buy it, invariably you get drawn to it. And then if you can make a shape that is going to be suitable to be worn by whoever you want to give this to, whether it's your wife, your girlfriend, or yourself, that's 90% of it. The rest is just putting something around it that will suit and sustain that beautiful gem. Beautiful. If you start with something that's already super looking, super fantastic, it's you just help it. That's all we're doing. cheers, toast to camera crew and director and post producer and everybody and screenwriter. I want to thank you for this Oscar, and it wouldn't be possible without